Hello guys and welcome to the channel. My name is Grit and the name of this channel is Spell and Sword. As the first video for this channel, I will be doing a review of this book, which is called Untitled. It is the first adventure slash source book for SIXMOREVODKA's Degenesis role-playing game. If you're not familiar with Degenesis, it is a role-playing game about the post-apocalyptic future of the year 2595. It is centered in a devastated Europe after an asteroid collision has rendered a lot of the Earth uninhabitable and has caused also different effects, including mutations in people due to the effects of the so-called primer, which was carried on these asteroids. In the Blood itself is a murder mystery, a detective story about discovering the murderer of Altair, an Anabaptist leader. Anabaptists are one of the cults in Degenesis. These cults are kind of main factions, and it's very possible the players belong to one of these factions, or they might be working against one of those factions, including the Anabaptists. The book itself is 107 pages, and inside the front cover we have a map of the region where Lucatore, the cloister where the murder happens, is located. Lucatore is located in a region called PURGARE, which was the former Italy, currently divided by the asteroid strike and a so-called Reaper's Blow, a crevice which separates PURGARE into two different areas. Lucatore is located quite near to Borca and Helvetica, two different regions which are also very influential in the game. Inside the back cover we have a map of Lucatore itself. Lucatore is a small town of about 3,000 people, and the main point of interest there is of course the manufacture of Elysian oils. Elysian oils are the reason why Altair the Anabaptist was so influential and why he was important in the world of Degenesis. These oils can be used to protect people from the effects of primer, which is the mutagenic compound brought by the asteroids onto Earth. So by using Elysian oils, it's possible to fight against the creations of the primer, the psychonauts, who are the mutated creatures who have invaded and occupied large parts of Europe. If we start looking at the book itself and its contents, it's divided into 4 parts. There is chapter 1, Oil and Fire, which describes Lucatore and the surrounding areas. Looking at the first chapter, it's very clear to see that the art and design in this book is very beautiful, and I think it's a testimony of the talents of the people working at SIXMOREVODKA, which is primarily a design house and not fully focused on creating role-playing games. So it's important to understand that Degenesis is a passion project for the people working there and not their main source of income. The art is very nice and the design is beautiful. The first chapter goes on to describe how to arrive in Lucatore. It has some fiction describing the arrival of a person in Lucatore the cloister, and then it describes the surrounding locations. The description of the locations is very brief, so you have some points about different trade outposts, about some border posts, the old image wall, information about the local clans and so forth, but there's not really a whole lot to use for subsequent adventures. Then the town of Lucatore itself is described, and there the different locations are given their own descriptions, and a lot of attention is paid to the cloister and in the description of the cloister we also have an in-depth description of the Elysian oils, which are the main reason that the cloister is in activity. So the Elysian oils have formed a very profitable trade good for the Anabaptist cult, and it's one of the reasons for their success against the psychonauts. There is a really beautiful picture of the cloister, a map which could be used by the players. I think one of my grievances with this book is that even though there are very beautiful maps included, there are not any type of player maps included which could be directly shown to players without revealing certain facts that the GM would prefer to keep secrets during the course of the game. The first chapter goes on to describe how to bring players into the town and what could be the hooks, how to introduce them to the adventure. There are separate descriptions for all the different cults, what would be their rationale into joining this adventure, or how they could be perceived when entering Lucatore. Of course, not all the cults are really friendly with each other, so there's a lot of possibilities for different types of conflicts, whether they are social or physical. One of the things that I liked about this chapter is the inclusion of rumors and the possibility of finding out different rumors about the location, some of them of course false, some correct, and they can give the investigators some clues about what has actually happened. Chapter 2, Sins of the Fathers, goes then into the plot itself, and of course there's not only a single plot about the death of Altair, but there are a couple of more plots which include the fate of Altair's son, Vikal, who is becoming a psychonaut due to the effects of the primer. Vikal has been kept as a captive in the cloister as he has been growing older, and it was one of the motivations behind the murder of Altair. I'm not going to go into the detail of what the murder plot is about and how it will be solved, but I will be going through some of the different actions in the plot. Another plot included in the adventure is also the presence of the Romano group and their enemy Black Tom, who belongs into another cult and has been following the Romanos to Lucatore with the intent of exacting vengeance against their leader. It's very possible that you could find the description of the Romanos quite stereotypical, I think, in the sense that they are a version of the Roma culture here in the Degenesis world, and here they are painted as the antagonists with, I'd say, very broad strokes and very stereotypical imagery. So this is maybe one of the things about this source book which is a bit jarring when you're reading it. The chapter 2 goes on to give descriptions of all the different personalities, and this is maybe one of the favorite parts of this book. It is very well detailed. The art here is quite small, black and white, so it's not so evocative or detailed as in future Degenesis books, but what I like here is that all the key players are given a background story, there is information about how to roleplay them, there's a profile which has all the stats, and in addition to all the different stats and skills that they have, the equipment, there's also a separate potential for them. Potentials are like feats in Degenesis, and I like the fact that they have really paid attention to the different feats, and they are really unique to all the different characters. The characters here represent the different cults, mainly Anabaptists in Lucatore, but also the clanners, so the Benesato family, and the Lombardo family who are present here in Lucatore. And then there are lots of different players who have come in to either to cause some problems in Lucatore or solve their own issues with different people. Some of the names here really remind me of Vampire the Masquerade, in that sense that some people have names which are kind of reminiscent of the names in some of the earlier Vampire modules, and I think this is also one of the influences that Degenesis has, not only in its rules and some design points, but also in the character creation of the NPCs. Some names might be a bit ridiculous, like Lucio Bastardo, but there are lots of these naming conventions or names where a person only has a kind of single name, maybe a bit Greek Roman style, that reminds me very much of Vampire the Masquerade. That the part about the NPCs closes off chapter 2, and then chapter 3 begins, and that is the beginning of the adventure itself. The adventure has been designed so that the players can either join when the murder is happening, so they could be present on day 1 and they would have a reason for already being in Lucatore, or they can join afterwards after several days have passed and then hear about the murder and be drafted into the investigation itself. The adventure description goes on to describe the events day by day, how the people react to the murder of Altair, and then how the events start to develop and what happens between the different factions in the city, and how the players finally become enlisted to find the murder of Altair and begin the actual investigation. The adventure itself goes on to pass through the different locations in the town, and I think after this venture, or during the adventure, the players will have a good idea of what the Anabaptists are about. They learn about the different ideologies inside the Anabaptist faith and how they have lived in Lucatore and what they are doing. For me, having the first adventure for the first module to be located in Lucatore and describe the Anabaptists was maybe a bit of a letdown, as they are not my favorite cult in Degenesis. And of course, when you think about a post-apocalyptic role-playing game, you could think that okay, maybe there's going to be lots of wandering around in the desert and killing mutants and riding on your on your tank or car or whatever. But actually, this adventure is quite a lot a social adventure where you are doing investigation and you are going through a small town and do not spend a lot of time in the wilderness. However, a part of the adventure does take place in the wilderness as the players are getting close that something is happening outside of Lucatore, and certain details emerge showing that insects are playing a part, and insects and infection are playing a part in what is happening. And so the players move from the Lucatore town to the wilderness outside it and start finding out things related to the psychonauts who are the products of the primer. And this then is tied into the fate of Vikal, so another plot in the adventure. I will not describe this in too much detail if you will play this adventure. And then also included in this is a meeting with Black Thumb, one of the personalities in Lucatore who has a score to settle with Romanos. So this leads into a meeting with Romanos as well. So this happened outside of Lucatore. Then this adventure starts to reach its finale inside Lucatore as different factions come together, and the role of the Anabaptist is challenged after Altair's death by a separate group, a religious group called Flayers, who come from outside of the town and are motivated to challenge the religious views of the Anabaptists. And as this finale is taking place, then also the Psychonauts, or the Psychonaut under Psychonaut outside Lucatore comes into play, and the reasoning behind the number of insects and their activity is explained, and everything ends in a very fire conflict where the fate of Lucatore and the Elysian Oils is solved. The finale of the adventure does not, in my view, offer a lot of different possibilities. Of course, you players might decide to do things in a different way, or they might actually lose their lives in the end of the adventure, but the GM is not really given a lot of information about the different choices you can make. And I think maybe this is one of the critiques that could be aimed at the adventure itself, that the plot is pretty tight. It does not leave a lot of room for different options, different choices for the players to do. So if the GM wants to introduce a different type of ending, wants to see something else happening, then they have some work to do in order to enable that. Also, the ending of the adventure is followed by an epilogue and a description of what the different key players in the adventure will do in the future. So it's possible that you could use this as a seed for different adventures and follow these players, or your PCs might have an idea afterwards that okay, this is what is happening with the people that you encountered in this adventure. Now the epilogue itself is about another plot which leads into the trilogy of adventures. So Untitled Blood is actually the first part of a trilogy called Jehammed's Will, and the epilogue, in my view, is a bit problematic because it introduces only at the very ending a key item which is necessary in the trilogy, but the players are not really given a lot of information about the importance of this part. They are basically given an artifact, but not a lot of information what to do with it, and they have some possibilities whether they want to give it to the Jehammedans or whether they want to use themselves, but the adventure does not really easily tie into the next adventure. So this, I think, one of the points where the designers could have maybe made it clear that what is the importance of this item and how it ties into the following adventures, and what would be the reasoning for the PC to keep it. If they decide to give it to the Jehammedans and get some goodwill among them, later on they would have to go back and retrieve it and undo their good work. So if you are thinking about this adventure from a design point of view, I think there's a lot of interesting things about the Degenesis world, and you get a view of what the world is like in this certain part of PURGARE. But as the first adventure for a game line after the smaller adventure in the rules book itself, I think it's a bit lacking in the sense that it does not, of course, fully capture all the different possibilities. I think, of course, it could be said that this is not possible to capture everything in Degenesis, as the plot is very complex, the history of the world is very detailed, and there's lots of things to do. The adventure itself is well crafted. One of the issues might be that as a GM you will have to work a bit to have a cohesive adventure and to join together all the different pieces so that the heroes or the players don't feel like they are being pushed in a certain direction, but the interactions with the NPCs appear to happen naturally. So to sum it up, I think In the Blood is a kind of solid adventure, not the thing that I was maybe expecting as the first product for Degenesis. It's well made, well crafted book, very nice to look at, well designed, and I think at this point, as Degenesis is being offered as free to play, meaning that you can get the adventure from the website as a PDF for free, that is a value that you cannot beat. If you like it, it's around 30 euros in Europe, so not a unreasonable price, and you cannot beat the free PDF, just as something to look into and to become more familiar with the world of Degenesis. That's the end of my review. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, give it a like and a subscribe, and then we'll see you again next week in the next episode.